If you are watching this video, congratulations! You are the recipient of a Lake Region Arts Council grant. Whether this is your first grant or your 20th, it's always an exciting moment, and you may have questions about how to proceed. This video will address some common questions and problem spots that our grant recipients tend to have. The topics we will cover include expressing gratitude for your grant, managing grant funds, misuse of funds, an overview, using the appropriate credit line, utilizing LRAC resources for promotion, evaluation, measurement and tracking, and some tips for your final report budget documents. Remember, if you ever have questions about managing your grant, LRAC staff are here to assist you. The first topic to cover is saying thank you. The bulk of our grants funding comes from legislative appropriations from the state of Minnesota and from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. For most of our grant programs, in both the first and second payment letters you will receive from LRAC, you will find a slip of paper with information about contacting your local legislators to thank them for their support of the arts in our state. Taking a few minutes to send them an email or to make a phone call to share your appreciation helps remind our elected officials that arts funding makes a big difference in our communities and in the lives of those living in our 9-county region. We greatly appreciate you taking the time to tell your officials, thanks for the grant. During the course of your project, something is likely to change. Perhaps it's your budget, if something is more or less expensive than initially planned. Maybe someone you were planning to hire is unavailable, and you have to hire someone else. Maybe your venue changes the dates of your exhibit, or you have to find a new location altogether. Whatever the cause of the change, it is important to report it to the Lake Region Arts Council, as some major changes require permission from either staff or the LRAC board. Reporting your changes is easy. We have a form for that. As soon as you become aware of a change or a potential change to your grant, simply log back on to the Founding Grant Management platform and complete the Universal Postponement/Revision Request form available to you. You do not need to contact the office prior to filling out this form. It is available to you at any time. Select the category that best lines up with the change to be made, give an explanation, and upload any documentation if applicable. Once you submit, the request will be reviewed by LRAC staff, and you will be notified if the change is small enough to be approved by staff or whether the LRAC board will need to approve it at the next monthly board meeting. In the case of the latter, you will be notified of the board's decision by email the day after the next board business meeting. For questions about changes, filling out the form, or for last-minute emergency changes, please call the LRAC office. As an organization that receives funding from the state of Minnesota, the Lake Region Arts Council observes a misuse of funds policy for the purpose of handling instances of misuse in a consistent manner. Misuse of funds means using state of Minnesota resources for any purpose other than those allowed by state of Minnesota statutes, laws, rules, policies, and Lake Region Arts Council receiving and disbursing the funds, and the program guidelines or grant contract through which funds are dispersed. Misuse can happen both intentionally or unintentionally. Intentional misuse occurs when the grantee knowingly spends funds in ways that are outside the allowable parameters of the state, the council, or the program. Misuse also occurs when a grantee spends funds in ways that are inconsistent with the submitted proposal and budget. Unintentional misuse generally occurs as a result of miscommunication or misunderstanding. All LRAC grantees are required to read the entire misuse of funds document as part of their grant agreement and contract. To avoid any issues with misuse of funds, it is important to review your grant application, proposed budget, and the contract frequently throughout the project, and to notify LRAC immediately when any changes or potential changes arise. For organizations, if staffing changes occur during the grant project, it is important to make sure everyone is aware of these misuse guidelines. A good rule of thumb is this: if you ever have to wonder if something would be considered a misuse of grant funds, it's best to run it by the LRAC office before proceeding. Every LRAC grant program has a credit line. This is the statement that gives credit to where the funding comes from and allows grantees to spread the word about how our tax dollars towards the arts are used. We have 3 different funding sources for our LRAC grant programs, so it is important to use the correct, pre-written credit line for your grant. In your grant contract, you agree that the credit line corresponding to your grant program will appear on all programs and publicity related to the project. Failure to include the credit line on your programs and publicity related to the project could be consideration of violation of your contract, so it is very important to include it on your materials. We also have logos for use in your marketing, which we encourage you to use as well. You can find the credit line in your grant contract, on the grant guidelines, and on the LRAC website under Grants, Grants Management. Logos can be found in the same place on the LRAC website. At the end of your grant, you will be required to upload your publicity documentation to the final report, so it is a good idea to keep digital copies of your materials and compile them as you go. We always enjoy pictures of your finished art or events as well, so those are a good thing to also keep track of. As you are putting together your publicity or marketing plan, be sure to remember that LRAC has a resource for promoting your grant activities, and for individual artists, a resource for self-promotion. These 2 resources are our Arts Calendar and our Artist Registry, both available on our website. Submit your upcoming arts events to the Arts Calendar, and don't forget to check the box if your event was funded by an LRAC grant. If you are an individual artist, we encourage you to fill out a profile on our Artist Registry, to which we routinely recommend organizations when they ask where they can find artists to perform, teach classes, and more. LRAC is here to support art beyond the grants, and these resources, as well as others, are available to individuals and organizations to help further your art. In addition to keeping track of your publicity materials, there are some additional items that you should be mindful of throughout the course of your grant project. For most of our grants, one of these items is your grant evaluation. If you received a legacy grant, a project grant, or an operating support grant, you may recall answering a question on the application about the outcomes you wanted to measure for this grant and how you wanted to complete the evaluation. If you don't remember your answers, you can check back to the application at any time. Contact the LRAC Grants Manager for assistance with this step. It is important that you execute your evaluation plan as you specified in the application, whether that be with surveys, collecting comments, talking to participants, or whichever other manner you selected on the application, and asking the evaluation questions given in the application. At the end of the grant, on the final report, you will be asked to submit documentation of your evaluation activities, including the surveys or comments you collected, and report back on the specific type of measurement you selected in your application. Be sure to remember to evaluate and to always keep track of your evaluation activities. Last but not least, let's talk about some tips for tracking your budget documentation. This is also something that will need to be uploaded or reported in the final report, and one of the most common areas for error in final reports. There are a few things you can do to help the process go smoothly. 1. Know what you need. For grant budget final reports, we only need documentation for expenses that the grant paid for. If there were items in your budget paid for by other grants or out of pocket, we don't need to see documentation for those expenses. All expenses paid for by the grant reported on your final budget will be cross-checked by LRAC with the documents for proof of payment you provide. If something's missing, you'll need to locate it in order to have your final report approved. Number 2, know what format we need it in. We require proof of payment for expenses, or, in other words, documentation that shows the money was spent. Documents that confirm payment include receipts, copies of canceled checks, and account transaction histories. Only one form of documentation is needed, so pick the format that works best for your record keeping. Invoices are not an acceptable form of proof unless accompanied by a document that shows the invoice amount was paid in full. Number 3, keep track as you go. If you or your organization prefer hard copy record keeping, start a grant-specific folder to keep track of copies of receipts and other documents. If you're a digital person, you can do the same, scanning and uploading documents into one place as you go. When the end of the grant rolls around, you'll be prepared to submit your documentation without any hunting for receipts you received months ago. Receiving a grant is exciting and doesn't have to be stressful. By employing the measures described in this video, you can successfully manage your LRAC grant project and be prepared for your final report. Thank you for watching, and best wishes for your grant project.